What's good? It's your boy Fanon. I'm going to take a little bit of a different subject today. I usually don't talk about the middleweights, but I thought this would be a good day to do so. There was a pretty good article that came out, or a conversation that took place between Eddie Hearn of Matchroom Boxing in the UK, the promoter of Danny Jacobs, and the HBO Sports Executive Vice President of HBO Sports, Peter Nelson. There's going to be, and before I get into that though, thank you very much to the super chats in the last live stream. I'm going to be doing another live stream pretty soon. And in order to get notified of that, hit the, if you listen to the channel, hit the subscribe button in the bell icon. And that way for the live streams, we know we can check it out and have a good conversation in the comment sections, or I can answer questions about this video in the next live stream. Leave your comments in the comment section, because I absolutely try my best to respond to any of the questions or comments that are left for me specifically. So, with that, let me jump in to what into the middleweights. So the middleweight lineup is essentially, the short of it is that Eddie Hearn did his job as a promoter in representing the interest of Daniel Jacobs. Daniel Jacobs, as many people know, recently signed to fight with as a promotional deal with Eddie Hearn and Matchroom Boxing. He was with the PBC, but then he signed with HBO. He has kept on Al Heyman as an advisor. And in the article, which I won't get into the specifics, I won't read the article, they mentioned that the manager of Daniel Jacobs specifically mentioned the fact that Daniel Jacobs, and Al Heyman got together and talked about the selection of their next opponent being Selecki. If I mispronounce his name, please forgive me. And how they thought that would give them a great opportunity to look good in their fight and to be able to create demand for a rematch with Gennady Golovkin. Eddie Hearn, in his talk, specifically stated that he was going to that he really appreciated HBO's brand. He said that he enjoyed working with people at HBO, but he said that they specifically, that Daniel Jacobs had signed with HBO because he really wanted to get a shot at a rematch with Gennady Golovkin. Gennady Golovkin is people who are familiar with boxing in the in the middleweight division know, is the WBA and the WBC middleweight champion. And his fight before Gennady Golovkin fought Canelo Alvarez, was against Daniel Jacobs. That was the very first fight in which, or the second fight in a row, honestly, because I think the same thing could be true, that I'm about to say could be true of the Kell Brook fight as well. But it was a fight in which many people believed that Daniel Jacobs won. I personally thought Gennady Golovkin won the fight. However, it was a very good fight. It was a very close fight. And Daniel Jacobs wants to get another shot to beat Gennady Golovkin. So he signed with Eddie Hearn of Matchroom Boxing and that signing was influenced by Eddie Hearn's promise to push for HBO to give Daniel Jacobs the rematch with Gennady Golovkin. However, where we are now is, and what Peter Nelson was saying in this conversation was like, look, and I'm paraphrasing him, that ain't up to me. That's what he says. It's not up to me. It's up to the fans. It's up to the sports writers and it's up to Daniel Jacobs to create fan and media demand for that bout by putting on a dominating performance against Selecki in his next fight. And if they do so, then, and the fans start demanding it, and the boxing writers start demanding it, then Daniel Jacobs might be able to get it. But then HBO's Peter Nelson throws all out of the window but when he says, but as we know, what the fans really are going to want is a third fight between Canelo Alvarez and Gennady Golovkin. So Peter Nelson shows and HBO shows their hand by saying, hey, yeah, if you knock this guy out, first of all, you got to knock the guy out to get a shot. But however, I'm not really going to give you a shot anyway, because not immediately, because what HBO really wants, and I'm sure that Tom Loeffler will want, and what Oscar De La Hoya and Golden Boy Promotions will want is a third fight between Gennady Golovkin and Canelo Alvarez. So that's a long haul. That's a long road for Daniel Jacobs to get that shot, based on what was said by Peter Nelson. Now, addressing whether or not there's going to be a big fan push for Daniel Jacobs and Gennady Golovkin to have a rematch, I doubt it. I doubt it very much. Of all of the welterweights, of all the middleweights, and I think that there are 6 middleweights, at least for me, and I consider myself, I'm a boxing fan. The middleweights that I find most interesting, and I'm not going to put these guys in any order from best to worst, because I do think that pretty much anybody in this group on the right day can cause a lot of problems for other people in this group. And those are, of course, Canelo Alvarez, who is a very experienced fighter, was the former WBC champion, but he let that belt go away. He got it off Miguel Cotto, and is definitely the biggest cash cow in boxing this side of Floyd Mayweather Jr., definitely in the Western Hemisphere. There could be arguments made for Anthony Joshua over in the UK, but definitely in the Western Hemisphere, North, South America, it's Canelo Alvarez. Then Gennady Golovkin, and because Gennady Golovkin holds the WBA belt, he holds the WBC belt. I believe he's an 8-time or 9-time defending champion. Some people will tell you that it's 23, but it's not, because in order to get that high with the number, you have to be including the IBO belts and the WBA regular titles that he held. But still, no knock on him whatsoever for saying that. I'm just saying that he's not catching up to Bernard Hopkins, no matter what they put in news in the sporting news articles. That's not true. But he is, without a doubt, at this point in time, the man at 160 pounds, because similar to Keith Thurman at 147 pounds, he owns the WBA and the WBC belt. He's the only unified champion. He's the only unified champion in the 160 pound division. And honestly, I think that he might also hold the IBF belt as well. So that is, if I'm sure about that, I hate to do this in the middle of the video. It shouldn't take very long, but I think he might also hold the IBF. He does. He's the WBA, the WBC, and the IBF champion at 160 pounds. So without a doubt, he is the man at 160 pounds. Then you have Billy Joe Saunders out of the UK, who is the WBO middleweight champion. Those are the 3 with the belt. Those are the 2 with the belts in the cash cow. Then you have Daniel Jacobs, Jermall Charlo, who I think is probably the up-and-coming, the scariest of everybody at 160 pounds. The former 154-pound fighter out of Texas, who was an absolute beast. And then you have Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade, who's a bit of an unknown at 160 pound, out of Providence. I think he's out of Providence, Rhode Island. Hasn't been the most active guy in the world, but has a tremendous amateur pedigree, right? So that pretty much, I believe, is the landscape at 160 pounds. And so I do not think that Daniel Jacobs really is going to create one knockout is going to create a lot of demand for him to from fans. I don't think all of a sudden if he has some spark out knockout of Lusicki, some guy he's supposed to beat to begin with, that all of a sudden you're going to see banners raised that are going to put him ahead of any of the other guys that are 160 pounds. I don't see that. And I don't want to say that it's disingenuous to that Peter Nelson is being disingenuous, or that Peter Nelson ever said, because I don't know what happened behind closed doors, where if Peter Nelson had ever promised Danny Garcia a fight. It was more than likely Eddie Hearn that promised to push for the fight and hopefully Danny Garcia. Excuse me, I keep saying Danny. If I say Danny Garcia, forgive me. Daniel Jacobs was just looking, number one, to be featured, right, and not be lost in the shuffle over at Showtime with the Charlos and with the rest of the PBC fighters. But because of the thinned out roster over at HBO, figured that he could get, number one, good money. But then because the two top 160-pound fighters are there, at least like I said, the guy with all the belts and then the guy with all the money, right, that he would be there for that, to be able to, capitalize on that. But I don't see a demand for that happening. Now for me as a fan, and if I take all of the in order to say what I got, if you take away all of the belts, right, all of the sanctioning bodies, all the promoters, all the networks, and all the politics that you have to go, that come into play, what I want to see is Gennady Golovkin, Canelo Alvarez get a definitive winner, and I am more than sure, I am 95% there that it's going to be Canelo Alvarez. I do not believe that it's going to be Gennady Golovkin. Personally, and every time I say this, I get somebody in the comment section that tells me that I'm out of my mind, that I'm the only person in the world that believes that Canelo Alvarez beat Gennady Golovkin. That may be true, but that's what I believe. That's what I saw with my eyes. I saw Gennady Golovkin throwing a lot of punches that I thought didn't land. I saw Canelo Alvarez throwing punches that I think were the most significant punches, and he pretty much was the one that was controlling. He was able to do what he wanted to do. Now, I do agree that there was periods of inactivity from Canelo where Gennady Golovkin stepped on the gas and Canelo Alvarez looked like he was tiring. But still, I think Canelo Alvarez won that fight. But at the same time, Canelo Alvarez also having been in the ring with Gennady Golovkin, I think Canelo Alvarez has the style. He has the versatility in his style to adapt now that he knows what Gennady Golovkin is bringing. I think that he'll have the ability to adapt and to react to what he knows. Do the same thing that he did, but stay off the ropes, keep the fight in the middle of the ring a little bit more. Make sure that he doesn't have any dips of inactivity, similar to the way that I'm sure Devin Alexander would approach a fight with Victor Ortiz, right? If he got back in the ring with Victor Ortiz, where it was clear that Devin Alexander won the majority. In my eyes, I thought he won the whole fight and maybe got 3 rounds. But he allowed by taking these dips in activity for the judges, and this is the only justification I can think for it, to start believing that Victor Ortiz was winning rounds, and once they started giving him 1 round, then they were looking for him to win the next. That's the only way that I can rationalize that decision. But if Canelo Alvarez turns that around and says, I'm going to win these first 3 rounds, I'm going to win the last 3 rounds, and I'm going to make sure that I dominate 2 rounds in the middle. 3 rounds in the middle. I'm going to get the first 3, I'm going to get the last 3, and I'm going to make sure I get 2 in the middle. Then that's 8 rounds, and he's going to win that, and he's going to win the fight. And I do believe that he won the first 3 in the first fight. I think he won the last 3 in the last one. In the first fight, I thought he won the first 3. I don't have my scorecard in front of him. I think I had him in the last 3, and it was that middle portion of the fight that Gennady Golovkin was most successful. But if Canelo Alvarez beats him convincingly in 2 of those rounds in the middle, that's how I see Canelo Alvarez winning the fight. That, along with the fact that Canelo Alvarez is the cash cow, and every bout that I've seen this dude, I've seen him lose fights. I've seen fights with Canelo Alvarez where I definitely thought he lost, and he still got the decision. So for me, Gennady Golovkin, Canelo Alvarez is going to come out with that victory. Now, in that scenario, that probably is the best case scenario for Daniel Jacobs, because Daniel Jacobs would be able to get Canelo Alvarez, I believe, easier than he could get Gennady Golovkin. Because I think Gennady Golovkin, more than likely, after these couple big paychecks that he gets, if he doesn't take that rematch to Showtime that HBO is going to push for, he might move to 168 pounds and try to seek another big money bout at 168 pounds. Could be that he goes over to the UK and fights somebody 168 pounds in the UK. Who knows? But I just don't think that he's going to get back in there with Daniel Jacobs. But Canelo Alvarez, on the other hand, his options, I believe, are more limited, because if he wants to get with Charlo, I don't think that he's going to want to fight Charlo. I believe that Canelo Alvarez himself would fight Jermall Charlo. And I've heard Jermall Charlo and Jermall Charlo, I believe that from what I am implying from what they say, that they have a lot of respect for Canelo as a fighter. But they believe that he's been, that Golden Boy Promotions, those guys have been avoiding him from the time that they were all there in 154. And here I will bring into the equation the promotional aspect of it. Oscar De La Hoya is going to have some say-so over whether or not what the next step is going to be with Canelo Alvarez. I don't necessarily think that they're going to maybe they'll do the third fight. If they decide to do the third fight, then, they decide to do the third fight and all this gets pushed back anyway. But if they don't, well, then they're not going to go to Jermall Charlo, because, number one, Jermall Charlo has a WBC belt. And I also think because the Charlos are with Al Heyman, that could add some type of difficulties because of the issues between Premier Boxing Champions and Golden Boy Promotions, which used to pretty much be the same thing. Funny to me, but it isn't anymore. And I don't think Oscar's ever really let go of that. So the best bet for Jermall Charlo is that Canelo wins, because Canelo is not going to fight. I don't think they're going to want to fight Jermall Charlo. I think the best bet for Daniel Jacobs is because I don't think the Gennady Golovkin is going to take that fight with Daniel Jacobs. Monetarily, I don't think he's going to take it. And I don't think and the fact that he already had difficulties with him, I think that he might decide to move up to 168. That's just my feeling. The best bet for Daniel Jacobs is Canelo. If Canelo wins, then I don't think Canelo's going to fight. He's expressed that he doesn't want to fight Billy Joe Saunders. He's also said that he does that. Also, I'm sorry. There's Demetrius Andrade in the mix, but Demetrius Andrade, I think Demetrius Andrade could be in a lot of ways similar to Billy Joe Saunders type of difficulty, because even though Demetrius Andrade likes to fight in this inside, he's also very versatile. But there's just a whole lot of stuff going on 160 pounds. And long and short of it is, I just don't think that there's really going to be. I don't really think that there's going to be what Peter Nelson is asking for. I'd love to see the fight, but I think that even for me personally, the Daniel Jacobs is way down the line on the guys that I want to see fight Canelo and Gennady Golovkin. The guy that I want to see and that I think is going to have the most groundswell for that fight eventually is going to be Jermall Charlo. Now, I wouldn't mind seeing Jermall Charlo and Daniel Jacobs fight. I'd love to see that. They're both advised by Al Heyman. They are on competing networks, so that could stand in the way. Daniel Jacobs versus Demetrius Andrade. I think that would be a good fight. They're both East Coast guys. One's from Rhode Island. The other one's from New York. They could mix it up. They could go head to head in New York City. I think that would be an exciting fight. From what I understand, Billy Joe Saunders does not want to fight Daniel Jacobs, and also Billy Joe Saunders' promoter Frank Warren is now mentioning the possibility of a George Groves versus Billy Joe Saunders fight in the UK. So, it's I don't think the middleweights are quite as deep as 147 pounds, but similar to 147 pounds, if all these guys would line up and fight, there's at least 4 or 5, maybe 6 combinations of fights that could take place between Demetrius Andrade, Canelo, Gennady Golovkin, Charlo, and Jacobs that could be real exciting. But anyway, that's my thoughts, and I'm out. Peace.